All right, so now that we've had a little bit of a run through of how to create polygon primitives, let's look at some of the things that we can do with polygonal geometry. I'm going to go ahead and create a polygon cube. Tap the F key to zoom in. By the way, you may have a different layout for your work panes. You may see something like this or like this. We've got the two side by side. I prefer to have the one pane layout. If you tap the space bar, you can hop between various views. So this is the side view, the front. You can see the label down here. I prefer perspective, and if I need to go to another shot rather than hopping over here and then hopping back, you can just hold the space bar down and you get what's called a hotbox. And if you click on Maya with the left mouse button and you hold it down, you have access to a lot of different views: bottom view, top view, left view, so on and so forth. You can create a new camera if you want, but this is usually how I'll hop between different views. And we don't need to do that right now. I just wanted to give you a heads up on how to use the hotbox to change the camera if you are so inclined. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at mesh. The mesh is going to give us some operations here. The first being Booleans. So Booleans are just ways that you can combine geometry to get the intersection, the difference, or the union. So what does that mean? So I just hit Control D, selected the object, Control D to duplicate. That's a little hotkey for you. So I'm going to go to Booleans, select them both, and then we'll go to union. So what it just did is it basically deleted the interior faces. These faces are technically not legal. A legal face has either 3 or 4 sides, and these faces all have more than 4 sides now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something. So we need to do an operation on this called triangulate in order to get them to be legal, and that's just this little button right here. So you can see it's basically just connected everything that needs to be connected, and this is what the new geometry actually looks like. So you can end up with kind of ugly triangles like this if you use an automatic solution, but it doesn't really matter. This is mostly just a demonstration of what is going on here. I'm going to go to face mode for just a moment, select these faces, and I'm going to hide them by hitting Control H. And you can see the inside here has been removed. So again, this was the union operation. And if I just go to, you can either go to show last hidden or show all. And I think it's, let's see, where's show all? I think there's a hotkey for it, but I can't remember. Anyway, I'm just gonna go ahead and say display show all. There we go. Okay, so that is union. Now you can come over once you've triangulated and you can hit quadrangulate, and it'll go ahead, and if you can figure out how to make a quad, it'll do so. So these are actually nice now. This would be a nice piece of geometry, and you would be able to export it into a game engine, as if for instance. And all of the operations that we're doing are stored in the history here in the inputs. So if you were to go through and make a change, so here's our polycube, like if I changed any of these, that stuff would feed up through here, and if I did any operations, it would potentially change the outcome. So you can modify it, but you may run into issues as your changes propagate up your history. And if you want to get rid of it all you've got to do is go to Edit, Delete by Type, and History. So it doesn't really make a difference in this case. It's pretty simple, but you can end up with a whole bunch of these things and your performance can begin to slow down. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at another option here. If I go to Create, and then we'll make another cube, another polygon cube. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it by hitting Control D, and W is the hotkey for move. We'll go ahead and select them both, go to Booleans, and then difference. So you can see it has removed the first item from the second item. Let me see, is that true? Yeah, so the last thing you select is going to be green. So let me try that again. Okay, yeah, so it removes the second thing from the first thing. So that is difference. And if I change my selection order, we will get the opposite result. So that is selection order dependent. And then finally we have intersection, which is going to basically just be the part of the geometry that makes up where your selection intersects the other geo there. So okay, that's Booleans. We have combined. So right now these are two separate objects. And if I select them both and hit combine, Maya will now consider them to be one object. But there's an important thing that happens when you do this. You can see all of the objects in the scene, by going to the outliner. It's a very, very important panel. Let me scoot it over here. So let me actually I'm going to delete everything and get rid of this stuff here. Some of these things you can't delete, like you can't get rid of the cameras, the default cameras, and some of these other things. But this is basically a completely empty scene. So if I go to create my polygon primitive, you can see now it is called pcube1, and here we have it in the outliner. And I can select it either in the outliner or in the workspace. Scoot this over a little bit. And when I select it, it's opening up my options here, my Polycube options, if I wanted to make some modifications, which I don't. So I've just hit Control D, and now I have pcube2. Maya will not allow you to have two objects, really to anything. You can't even, like if you have a material or something, it's not going to let you ever reuse the same name in the same level. So like I can take these, and if I hit Control G, now they're in a group, which means their names are going to be unique in the group, but I can have a pcube2 outside of the group. I don't want to throw too much at you, so don't worry about that Control G thing there. Let me just hit Control Z to back up out of that. But, so I've got these two things here, and if I combine them, watch what happens over here. I now have these are called transforms, and it's just basically, or it's not even really worth getting into, but we'll figure it out. I mean, I'll cover it later. Basically, it's just, this is the construction history that's left behind when you combine two objects. And this stuff does, like, we don't really need this stuff sitting around. So whenever you do a combine operation, it's always a good idea to come over and then just delete the history on that, and you can see those remnants of the previous geo are now gone. They're no longer in our outliner here. As opposed to a Boolean where it creates a single piece of geo that's watertight, these are two separate elements that are considered one piece of geometry. So I'm just going to come over here and hit separate, and now you can see each one is individually selectable, but now once again I have this weird thing going on here where I've got this transform and this group. So I want to go ahead and just pop these out of this weird structure here. I want to keep my stuff as clean as possible. So you can select them and hit edit delete by type history. And it got rid of the transform, but we're still grouped. So I'm just going to go ahead. You can either middle mouse drag to get them out of there, or you can hit Shift P. Shift P basically just means unparent, and P is parent. So P will parent whatever the first selected items are to whatever the last selected item happens to be. So I'm going to hit Shift P there, and we can just delete this guy. So that is combine and separate. I end up doing this all the time. So you've got to kind of hop around. I mean, like, it doesn't really break anything to leave all that stuff in there, but I mean, it can just fill this up with a bunch of just empty stuff that you don't really need to worry about too much. Okay, couple things here that are immediately useful. If you go to, let me go ahead and just delete one of these faces, and then you can go to fill hole, and it'll go ahead and just fill the hole. Now in this case, it's a very simple hole. There are no issues, but if you have a more complex piece of geometry, this may work, but you may run into some problems, or you may have to go there and add some edging and whatnot. Okay, so that's going to be Booleans, combine, separate, dealing with the different camera views, the hotbox, spacebar for that, Control D to duplicate geometry, and how to organize things in the outliner, Shift P to unparent, P to parent, and yeah, I think that's about it. Okay, cool. So we're gonna pick up the next video looking at the edit mesh options.